Welcome back to the deep dive. In the world of massive projects, we're talking skyscrapers, data centers, huge infrastructure, there's a single moment that's actually more critical than breaking ground.
It's the moment of handover.
Exactly. It's when the client, or the employer, as the contract calls them, officially takes control of the finished construction, the works. And today, we're doing a surgical deep dive into the very specific, high-stakes rules that govern that shift in liability.
It's the highest stakes moment because that is precisely where risk transfers. We're going to focus on one single document, really. The Taking Over Certificate, or TOC.
The TOC.
For anyone managing project finance or schedule, this piece of paper is, it's everything. Once it's issued, liability for the asset shifts from the contractor to the employer. And crucially, the clock for any delay damages. It stops.
So this is not just ceremonial paperwork.
Not at all. It's a formal trigger for insurance, for responsibility, and for massive financial penalties.
So our mission today is to unpack that exact protocol. We're going to look at the surprising ways the contract actually protects both sides. We'll find out how a contractor can get paid for delays caused by bureaucracy, and even how an employer's own impatience can, believe it or not, force them into taking over a project before they're even ready.
We'll break down the standard rules for completion, what happens when an employer, jumps the gun and uses a building early, and the ultimate leverage a contractor has if the employer gets in the way of final testing.
Okay, let's start with the basics. The standard road to completion. The contractor says, we're done. What are the non-negotiable proof points the contract demands before the employer has to accept the project?
Right. Think of it as a checklist. The contract is extremely precise here. There are 5 key conditions.
5. Okay.
The first one is foundational. The physical works must be completed exactly to the contract spec. And this is critical. They must have passed the tests on completion.
So you have to prove it, actually.
You have to prove the facility does what it was designed to do. But performance isn't enough. You also need the paperwork.
The documentation, I was going to ask about that.
Absolutely. That's conditions 2 and 3, and they are mission critical. Condition 2 is that the engineer has to give a notice of no objection to the contractor's as-built records.
The as-built, so the drawings of how it was actually built, not just designed.
Exactly. And condition 3 is very similar. A notice of no objection for the provisional operation and maintenance manuals, the O&M manuals.
Why are those mandatory for handover? I mean, can't the employer just sort that out later?
Well, think about it. How can you safely operate or maintain a complex asset if you don't have the instruction manual? Or if you don't know where the real electrical conduits are? If the documentation isn't approved, the asset is, for all practical purposes, incomplete.
Okay, so you've proven it works. You've handed over the as-built maps and the instruction manual. What's left?
Condition 4 is one that often gets forgotten. The contractor has to have carried out any required training. If they were supposed to train the employer's staff on a new system, that has to be done.
Right.
And the 5th condition is the certificate itself. The taking over certificate has to be issued or deemed to have been issued.
Okay, let's talk about that timeline. The contractor has to kick the whole process off.
Correct. The contractor gives a notice to the engineer. And they can't do it too early. It has to be not more than 14 days before they think they'll be ready.
And once that notice is in, the clock starts ticking for the engineer.
A very strict clock. They have a 28-day window. And within those 28 days, they have 2 options. First, they can issue the TOC. And what's interesting here is that they can issue it even if there's minor outstanding work.
As long as it doesn't affect the safe use of the building.
Precisely. A missing light fixture? Fine. A non-functional fire suppression system? Absolutely not.
And the second option?
Rejection. But they have to reject it with clear reasons. They have to specify exactly what work is missing, what defects need fixing, or what documents are wrong. No vague rejections allowed.
Now, this is where we get to that massive contractual safeguard you mentioned, the deemed certificate. What happens if the engineer just misses the deadline? Ignores that 28-day window.
This is a crucial safety net for the contractor if the engineer fails to either issue or reject the application in time.
And the contractor has already ticked those first 4 boxes.
Right. The testing is done, the manuals are approved, all that's done. If that's the case, the contract essentially says, time's up, the project is treated as finished.
And the TOC is just automatically issued.
It's deemed issued. And here's the kicker. It's backdated to the 14th day after the engineer first got the contractor's application.
Wow. So the employer can't just drag their feet to avoid taking over and, to keep charging delay damages.
That's exactly what it's designed to prevent. It's a very powerful incentive for the engineer to be diligent, because if they drop the ball, the employer automatically inherits the liability and the warranty clock starts ticking, maybe before they're ready.
Okay, so that's the standard path. Let's shift to where it gets really interesting. The reality of big projects is commercial pressure. What happens if the employer needs to use, say, one floor of an office building before the whole thing is done?
This brings us to the rules for taking over parts of the works. The engineer can issue a TOC for a part, but, and this is a big but, it's at the employer's sole discretion. The default rule is clear. You are not supposed to use any part of the works until a TOC is issued for it.
But people break rules. What if the employer just decides to move in their servers or their office furniture anyway? They just start using it.
The contract sees that coming, and the consequences are immediate and automatic. The moment they start using that part, it is deemed to have been taken over.
Deemed again.
Yep. And this is the vital risk shift. The contractor immediately ceases liability for the care of that part. So if the employer's own staff then, damage a wall while moving in a desk, that's on the employer. The risk is now theirs.
So unauthorized use forces the handover and flips the liability switch instantly. The engineer then has to scramble and issue a certificate.
Immediately. The contract says they must issue a TOC for that part right away. It's the contract's way of saying, you want to use it, fine, you own it right now. The certificate will still list all the outstanding work and tests, of course.
And what about the contractor? I mean, now they have the employer's staff wandering around their construction site. That's a disruption.
And they get compensated for it. If the contractor incurs any cost because the employer took over a part early, they're entitled to be paid for that cost plus profit. The contract recognizes they've been disrupted and deserve to be made whole.
Now, what about the money? The delay damages. If the employer has taken over half the project, they can't still charge the full daily penalty for the remaining half being late, can they?
That's the logic, exactly. The daily rate of delay damages for the rest of the project gets reduced proportionally.
Proportional to what, though? The value.
To the value, yes.
Yeah.
The reduction is based on the ratio of the value of the part they've taken over compared to the value of the whole thing. So if they take over a part worth 30% of the total project value, the daily penalty for the remaining work is reduced by 30%.
But the overall cap on damages doesn't change.
Correct. The maximum amount of damages stays the same, just the daily rate is adjusted. It's a really well-balanced mechanism, actually.
All right, let's move to the ultimate confrontation, the final boss battle, if you will. What if the contractor is ready for the final tests, the tests on completion, but the employer is actively blocking them?
This is the contractor's ultimate leverage. This clause kicks in if the contractor is prevented from carrying out those tests for more than 14 days. And that can be 14 days in a row or a bunch of smaller periods that add up.
And it has to be the employer's fault.
Oh, absolutely. The cause has to be the employer's personnel or something else the employer is responsible for. Maybe they didn't provide the power needed for a test run, or they just refused to grant access to the site. It's direct interference.
So the contractor is stuck. They can't prove the project is finished because the employer won't let them. What's the shortcut here?
It's a huge shortcut. The contract just bypasses the whole testing process. The employer is deemed to have taken over the works on the date the tests would have been finished if they hadn't interfered.
That is extraordinary.
It is. The engineer then has to immediately issue a taking over certificate to formalize it. The employer's obstruction basically forces them to accept the project, ready or not.
But wait, if the tests are crucial for safety, does the contractor just get a free pass on ever doing them?
No, the obligation doesn't vanish, it just gets deferred. The contractor still has to carry out those tests as soon as practicable. The engineer has to give them 14 days notice later on when they can finally get back on site to do them.
And I assume the contractor gets paid for all this trouble.
Without a doubt. If they suffer delay, they get an extension of time. And if they incur extra cost for having to remobilize crews or just for the hassle,
They get cost plus profit.
cost plus profit. The entire clause is there to make it incredibly painful for an employer to interfere with the final steps.
So when you put all of this together, the big lesson here is that this whole process is intensely formalized. It's not about goodwill or handshakes.
Not at all. It's managed by the contract with very clear deadlines, automatic financial adjustments, and immediate shifts in liability if you don't comply. It's all there to protect the contractor from being held hostage at the finish line.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? It means that the transition from a construction site to an operational asset is all about these precise contractual triggers. If you're an employer, you have every incentive to follow the rules, because if you don't, If you use a part of the building early or you get in the way, the contract can automatically shift massive liability right onto your books.
It creates certainty in what can be a very uncertain and risky environment.
And as a final provocative thought for you to explore on your own, think about those scenarios where the employer's own actions inadvertently force them to take over the works. Consider the immediate insurance implications. If you're an employer and you're compelled to accept a new data center before the final fire suppression and cooling tests have actually been run, what happens if there's a catastrophic failure the very next day? What unforeseen risks are you taking on without that final technical stamp of approval? That's something to mull over.